The Holy Gospel according to St. Mark, the 13th chapter. Glory to you, O Lord. As Jesus was leaving the temple, one of his disciples said to him, "Look, teacher, what massive stones, what magnificent buildings." Jesus replied, "Do you see all these great buildings? Not one stone here will be left on another. Every one will be thrown down." As Jesus was sitting on the Mount of Olives opposite the temple, Peter, James, and John, and Andrew asked him privately, "Tell us, when will these things happen? And what will be the sign that they are all about to be fulfilled?" Jesus said to them, "Watch out that no one deceives you. Many will come in my name, claiming, 'I am he,' and will deceive many people. When you hear of wars and rumors of wars, do not be alarmed. Such things must happen, but the end is still to come. Nations will rise against nation and kingdom against kingdom. There will be earthquakes in various places and famines. These are the beginning of birth pains." The Gospel of the Lord. Praise to you, O Christ. You may be seated. I remember running on a treadmill 2 to 3 times a week. It is a distant memory. I keep thinking I should start running. In fact, yesterday I thought, I forgot to run today. That's been 12 years in a row now. But for a time, I was on the treadmill 2 or 3 times a week. Of course, a treadmill doesn't get you anywhere. It gives you exercise, it makes your body healthy, but you never leave the room. You just run in one place. Sometimes people will talk about life, or they will talk about their job as a treadmill. That is, there is some kind of situation, it is tiring or boring or unpleasant, and it's hard to escape. You tread the same old day after day. Our gospel reading that you just heard is used by some people as a treadmill of fear, a treadmill of dread. One writer remembers growing up, and he and his family would go to lots of revivals. And Mark 13, this passage was usually the passage for the last day of the revival. It was the night service, the last service, and the preacher almost always read from Mark 13. And the preacher would give a hellfire and brimstone sermon. If you had not received Jesus yet, this might be your last chance, because Jesus might come tomorrow, and boy, will he be mad. He will see that you did not accept him tonight, and he'll be mad tomorrow if he comes, and that's your last chance. You'll be lost. You'll be left behind. That's the dread. That's the treadmill of fear that some preachers and evangelists will plop you on to. They can get you on a treadmill of fear or a treadmill of dread. They consider that a success. Interesting that politicians use the same kind of tactic. They will say when it's an election year, if you vote for the other person, there's a lot of fear there. I heard it this year. If you vote for that candidate, democracy will be over. If you vote for the other candidate, democracy will be over. Did you hear that? Yeah. There are preachers who do the same thing. You better do this, you better stop that, or Jesus won't love you. You'll be left behind. So people crank up the speed on the treadmill. They set it steeper, and they keep doing more, and they keep doing more until they almost could fall down exhausted. They never get to feel restful in the arms of God. So here's an idea. Don't tread on the dread. Don't get on that running course. That is a running course of fear. Don't keep treading on the drudgery of dread. Don't tread on the dread. The good news of Jesus is that you can get off the treadmill. Our gospel, the words of Jesus, those are not meant to be a treadmill of dread and fear. Some will call Mark chapter 13 the little apocalypse. Apocalypse literally means, we think it means disaster. It means uncovering, unveiling. It means the revealing or the revelation of things to come, things that are secret now, and often it deals with the end of things or the end of the world as we know it. This passage is specifically about the ending of the temple in Jerusalem, but Mark will go on and talk about the possibility of the world coming to an end. But you know, to experience an apocalypse, a revealing, is really to experience fresh sight, clear seeing, honest disclosure, accurate revelation. Jesus is not a fearmonger. Don't miss his words that say, do not be alarmed. Do not be alarmed. No doubt, no doubt about it. There are dreadful and fearful things that happen in this world. Jesus, however, wants to instill faith, and he wants to instill hope in the midst of whatever happens in this world. And so Jesus points us toward birth. Those last words, these are birth pains. He points us toward birth, to the end of suffering, and to the beginning of something that is brand new. So here's the story. Jesus and the disciples have been in the temple. They just saw, as Pastor Kevin read last week, they saw a widow putting in her last 2 coins. The temple chiefs had lost sight of God's purposes, and they put burdens on the backs of widows and the backs of the poor. And as Kevin said last time, they were now life-taking, not life-giving. They'd become over-the-top legalists and oppressors. So as they are leaving the temple, the disciples look around and they say, wow, what massive stones, what magnificent buildings. The temple looked like it would last forever. It was gigantic. Some of the stones were 40 feet long, 18 feet wide. Some of them weighed hundreds of tons. The small stones were 2 or 3 tons, others hundreds of tons. That building project had taken 46 years. In the front of the temple, there were huge pillars, and they were 40 feet tall. The temple was made of white marble, and in fact, much of it was covered with solid sheets of gold. When the sun hit it, you almost could not look at it. The walls towered over Jerusalem, in some places 400 feet above the city. Inside those walls were 45 acres where the bedrock mountain had been shaved down flat. Inside It was magnificent. Outside, it was magnificent. And at the time of Jesus, the temple could hold 250,000 people. If you watched football yesterday, I bet you there was not one stadium that holds 250,000 people. What massive stones, what magnificent buildings, the disciples say. It's hard to tell whether they are awestruck by the beauty or whether they are thinking, wow, this is what we're up against. It's hard to tell. They see permanence, but Jesus sees rubble. Jesus does not see permanence, and he says, do not live under the illusion that this is permanent or even right, because all these walls will come tumbling down. It came true just a few decades later. They go across the valley to the Mount of Olives, opposite the temple. An interesting phrase right there. I've been to the Mount of Olives. When you stand on it, you look across. You can see where the temple is or was. You can see the city of Jerusalem from the Mount of Olives. And they asked Jesus, when? When is this that the walls will buckle and crumble? And what will be the signs that this is going to happen? Jesus will never tell them when because he does not know. But Jesus says, watch out for doomsday deceivers. He says you'll hear of wars and rumors of wars, nation against nation, earthquakes, stars falling down. Do not be alarmed. Don't panic. This is routine history. Since the beginning of time, there have been wars and rumors of wars and natural disasters. This is routine history. Don't get caught up, he's saying, in apocalyptic fervor. These are birth pains. That's probably the key to this passage. These are birth pains. Yeah, birth pains are hard. Labor is long, but the end is nothing to fear. The end is a new baby. The end, in this case, is a new world. The kingdom come. The end is a new beginning. When my wife gave birth to our oldest son, when she was in labor, and it was a difficult labor, I coached her on breathing techniques. We had taken classes. We had learned how to breathe. And we learned when to go fast and when to go slow. And so in labor, I said to her, dear, it's time to breathe. And she said, no, I'm not gonna. And I said, but you have to. This is the time now. This is the time to breathe. And she said, no, you did this. It's your fault. And then a no-nonsense, well-upholstered nurse took her by the arm and said firmly, honey, breathe. Lucinda later told me she thought at that moment, if I don't breathe now, I'll never breathe again. And so she breathed. Maybe the only good pains are labor pains. I know I'm a guy. I don't know those, but maybe someone wrote, the only good pains are labor pains because there's the baby, the new baby. The world may appear as though it's coming to an end. There are times in your life when it seems your world is coming to an end. And Jesus says these are birth pains of a new world just waiting to be born. The death of Jesus was a precursor to his resurrection. And so the destruction of the temple will be a precursor to a brand new reality. In fact, when the temple was gone, and we know that Jews and also early Christians would go to the temple, but when the temple was gone, Christians and Jews both organized congregationally. And that was what allowed them to become global religions, spread throughout the world. Birth pains. And then a second point of this, besides the birth pains, the second point is that Jesus himself is the new temple. It's Jesus. The real change that the world needs is Jesus' own death and resurrection. That's what the world needs. And that's why Jesus will refer to his own body. He said, destroy this temple, in 3 days it will be raised up. He was talking about himself. It's Jesus. Temples may be destroyed. Someday all walls come tumbling down. But the place where God dwells will never be destroyed. The stars may fall, but there will be a trumpet sound, a raising up. When Jesus is in the house, things change. And sometimes the destruction of the old, as painful as it may be, makes way for the new. The end of what is becomes the start of what will be. The bedrock of faith is not in temples. The bedrock of faith is not in signs. The bedrock of faith is Jesus Christ himself. Jesus shows us a way of life, not a way to fear the end of life. So do not be afraid. Do not tread on dread. There is mirth after birth. Amen.